Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, and we've got a one quarterback startup mock draft for you. And I've got Matt Chester and Sam Wagman here to help me break it all down. You may know Matt as the Fantasy Football Mad Jester. Matt, thank you for being here. Tell everybody where they can find your work.
Hey, thanks, Keith. You can find me on Twitter at FFMadJester, or you can find me at Optimus Fantasy. It's a new company we're starting. The website is dropping July 1st, and a lot of exciting things coming up, a lot of databases, trade charts, articles galore, everything you possibly want. It's going to be just a fantasy central.
Awesome stuff. Sam, good to talk to you again. Kind of tell everybody where they can find your work.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at Swagman95, and all of my fantasy football content presently is over at Football Guys. Great team over there. Got a lot of stuff that is in the works over there for the rest of this summer. So very excited for that. You guys should go check that out.
Awesome stuff. We have actually got the draft started. I want to kind of break down the ground rules there. This is a one quarterback startup mock draft. We haven't done a one QB draft in a couple of months, so this will be nice and different. It is full PPR. It is 6 points per pass touchdown as in standard here at CBS, and we start 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex. No, we will not be drafting a defense or a kicker. The first 5 picks are already in. Dan Schneier already auto-drafted, so we've got that out of the way. Justin Jefferson goes first overall. Jamar Chase goes second. CeeDee Lamb goes third. Then it's Bijan. Then it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I wanted to ask you guys, and I'll start with you, Matt. And when I updated my rankings for June, it seems like every month when I do this, CeeDee Lamb gets a little bit closer to Jefferson and Chase. Is there an argument for CeeDee Lamb even higher than third overall in this format?
Absolutely. Did you know that he's only 24 years old, the same age as Jefferson and Chase?
Yeah. That's and was better than those guys last year.
He was. I think Jamar Chase, he's done really well to start out his career. I think he might have maxed out roughly over 310 points, but I think CeeDee Lamb hit 400, and that's probably the best case for him is that you might get an extra 100 points out of him. You know, he's done it before, and that's the likeliest indicator of repeat.
Sam, we see Bijan go as RB1 with the 4th pick. Is that where he belongs, or should we see more wide receivers before we see a running back?
I'm not sure that we should see that many wide receivers. I wouldn't be opposed to taking someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown in front of him, but Bijan's as close to a bulletproof prospect as you got coming into the league. And even last year, under Arthur Smith, really managed to make the most of his touches, had the most targets among running backs behind Breece Hall last year. And I think he should be in for a really good season this year. I'm not sure if we get the Christian McCaffrey season that people have kind of tossed around over the last couple of weeks, but he should definitely get close to that.
And I have made my first selection. I came up on the clock with the 8th overall pick, Matt, and a little bit of an internal struggle there for me between Marvin Harrison and Jahmyr Gibbs. But speaking of bulletproof prospects, Harrison seems to be that guy. He is my wide receiver 5 right now, which seems to be pretty close to the consensus. Are you fine with him this early in a startup?
I am. Just to touch on your last question with Sam, I think the format matters a lot. And when you're only able to start up to 4 wide receivers, you do need to kind of lean a little bit more running back heavy. Whereas opposed to in some of these leagues, you can start up to 6 wide receivers. You really need to lean into wide receivers for Dynasty in that case. But I love your pick of Marvin Harrison Jr. I think it's probably the end of that little the tier drop off is right after you pick them.
So we have finished round 1. It's Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, then Bijan Robinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Marvin Harrison, and Garrett Wilson, then Jahmyr Gibbs, Malik Neighbors, and Sam, you finished the round off with A.J. Brown. Do you feel like 12th overall for A.J. Brown is, well, I wish somebody had fallen, but I'm fine with Brown there? Or do you feel like you're getting a little bit of profit?
It's definitely a little bit of both. I would probably lean towards the former a little bit. I was in kind of a decision over A.J. Brown or Puka Nacua, and then decided to take Devon Achane with the second pick or the first pick of the second round as well. But I do think Brown has a lot of security there. He obviously, just signed a brand new deal. Jalen Hurts has his deal. The Eagles offense is pretty locked in there for the next few years to come. I think AJ Brown should go right, to the top of the list, as one of the top 5 receivers for fantasy for the next few years at least. So I'm pretty comfortable with taking him there. I would have loved for someone like Garrett Wilson or even Malik Neighbors to fall there for me, but don't mind AJ Brown. I have him slightly ahead of Puka Nacua. It kind of just, it comes down to preference there for me.
So, Matt, I think that's interesting because he mentioned a name there, Malik Neighbors, who went right before A.J. Brown in round 1. Quite a difference, though, when you're talking about those two profiles. So one of them, Neighbors, the rookie, that we have some real concerns about what year 1 looks like with Daniel Jones, but probably has a 10-year runway. The other one, A.J. Brown, still in his prime, but you're maybe looking at 2 to 3 years of that prime left. And he's a no doubt about it, top 20 pick in redraft this year. When you're going into a startup, does that decision between a guy like Brown and Neighbors in round 1 kind of impact the rest of your draft?
I'd say for sure. If you're taking Malik Neighbors as your number 1 pick, you're really going with a fragile build for later type of team, and you really need it to pan together. I mean, that's a big dart throw for Ben. I'd much rather prefer AJ Brown because he's done it before. And you said he's got 2 or 3 years left of his prime, but he's really just now entering his prime. I think he's going into his age 26 or 27 season. He's got at least 3 or 4 years ahead of him, I think. And I think that his price has gone down just because of how the second half of last year went, when I think he still ended up as the wide receiver 4 overall. But in the first half of last year, I think he was breaking records. He was hitting 30-point games pretty regularly. That's a very comfortable pick. The one trade back that I regret in this rookie draft recently is I traded Marvin Harrison for AJ Brown in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It was league specific, but I don't regret it too much.
You know what I regret is doing the thing that I really try not to do, is ask you guys a question right before you go on the clock. Matt, though, you handled that fantastically. So I will go to Sam here because it'll be a long time before Sam picks again. It was a nice thing to put him on the corner like that. I took Tyreek Hill in round 2. And so kind of a strange combination of players with Marvin Harrison, with Tyreek Hill, but Hill was my clear best value. How many years do you think we have of Hill? We're talking about Brown having 3 to 4 years. How many years do we think have of Hill as an elite producer?
So what are we at now, since Tyreek Hill said he wanted to kind of play out his contract in Miami and then would consider, walking away from football, basically stating that he had done all he had accomplished. I think we're about 2 years removed from him saying that, but there's no real sign of him slowing down. So if he manages to keep going at the rate that he's been going on the past couple of years in Miami, which is just absolute game-breaking ability for fantasy, far and away leading in points per game last year, I think the sky is clear for him to produce for another 2 to 3 years easily. If Miami can convince him to come back on another deal after, I do think they're going to end up paying Tua Tagovailoa, a market value contract very soon. So, with Hill, I think it's all up to him what he wants to do, but there's no slowdown for him in terms of like the output that he put out last year. So I'd be very comfortable taking Hill if I wanted to go and win now. And I think it's a really actually good pairing with Harrison and Hill. You have on one side the supposed best talent to really enter the league at the wide receiver position in many, many years. And then you have pretty clearly the wide receiver 1 for, like a redraft kind of format. So if you want to win now and you want to set your team up to win in the future, I think this is a perfect start for you there.
Okay. So Matt, Adam Azer just did the thing, taking the first quarterback in this draft. End of round 2. And I don't say that like I spend a lot of time poking fun at Azer. I don't say that to poke fun because I think in a dynasty league, a quarterback like Mahomes, who I think we have no reason to believe anything's going to change with him in the next 5 years, is absolutely worth a late second round pick, even in a 1 QB draft. How many quarterbacks, though, are we considering in the next round or so?
Me personally, none, just because the value falls so nicely around, we'll just say around round 9. There's still a whole bunch of guys that really could hit the number 1 overall for the next few years. There's a few guys under 30 just in those late rounds, and the talent falls off the positional players pretty quickly around round 5 or 6. So I want to fill up my starting positions before quarterback in these 1 QB leagues. Yeah, I know you don't like making fun of Adam Azer, right?
No, I do a lot.
Okay,
Yes.
well, I just want to make fun of him about that trade that you made with him, where you hoisted him for Malik Neighbors the other day. You got Trey McBride, and you still got the 107. Is that right?
Yeah. I was on the clock, and I was kind of like going back and forth between JJ and May because I needed a quarterback pretty bad. And I was able to trade. I traded the 104. He took Malik Neighbors. I got Trey McBride, and then got Drake May with the 107.
That is such a nasty twist because you got everything you wanted in the end anyway. You got a free Trey McBride. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and of course, Adam's a Giants fan and has absolutely zero regrets. He's got Malik Neighbors for however long this lasts, and it's not like Daniel Jones could run that for him. So yeah, I felt good about that, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Sam, I want to ask you one more question about the quarterbacks because we may not see one again for a while. When you look at Mahomes versus Hurts versus Allen versus Jackson, there's not a huge difference in age with that group. But do you feel like there's a difference in how long of a production you're getting as a true like QB1 contender with how much those guys count on their running?
I definitely think it's a possibility. I think Mahomes less than them since he's more of a scrambler and less of a pure runner.
Right.
But looking at Jalen Hurts, looking at Lamar Jackson, those are guys that the profiles have tended to skew towards shorter careers for sure. But I think as long as they avoid a major injury and keep themselves out of harm's way, like Lamar loves to run, but he doesn't put himself in harm's way. He's usually elusive enough that it's not an issue with him. So I can't say that I foresee it becoming an issue with them. I think as well as Josh Allen, I think he's just so burly and big that, that style of play, as long as he doesn't put himself in harm's way, I think they'll be okay. I think that's something that like fans of Anthony Richardson should hope that, he develops going forward is the ability to not put himself in harm's way when running the football, basically, running into contact, trying to avoid that contact going there. So I do think they're all going to be okay for the most part. Obviously we definitely need them to stay healthy in order to keep putting out that high fantasy output.
Well, and Allen does have the body. You're right. But I think like you mentioned, fans of Anthony Richardson need to hope that he learns how to stop putting himself in harm's way. Josh Allen's never learned that. Like he intentionally goes and seeks out that contact and then laughs about it. And so I get a little bit concerned when I see that. If I was a Bills fan, I would get very concerned when I see that because I don't really believe he can just keep doing that forever. Let's take a look at round 2 now. We had Devon Achengo with the 13th pick, followed by Jonathan Taylor, Puka Nacua, Chris Olave, Tyreek Hill, Travis Etienne, Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Sam Laporta, Rome Odunze, Patrick Mahomes, and Brandon Ayuk. Again, that's round 2. Achane, Taylor, Nacua, Olave, Hill, Etienne, London, Waddle, Laporta, Odunze, Mahomes, and Ayuk. Laporta, the first tight end off the board there in round 2. We don't get another one really for almost another round, Matt, when you took Mark Andrews. Should there be that much of a gap between Laporta and Andrews? And how soon before we should see either Trey McBride or Brock Bowers or kind of the next group of tight ends go off the board?
I think anytime you want to start filling out your onesie positions, round four is probably an okay place to start looking for tight ends, especially because in this league you can flex a tight end. So if you do end up with, Sam Laporta, if he, I know it's bad etiquette to speak about players that have not been drafted yet, but if he were to pair up Sam Laporta with another possibly young stud tight end in the 5th round, he can start both of those every week, and I don't mind that at all. You got to get your guy.
And I will just say, just to clarify, we are not concerned about etiquette at all. Partially just because I'm not concerned about it, partially because we're doing a podcast. So we're going to have to talk about these guys. Nobody get mad at me when I talk about the guy that you wanted to take. He wasn't going to be there for you anyway. Yeah, when you say another young stud, Sam, I've actually got Trey McBride and Sam Laporta like back to back. So I do have Laporta ahead of him in Dynasty. I've got McBride a little bit ahead in redraft right now. Am I crazy for having McBride that high?
I'm not the biggest Trey McBride fan. I do understand why people are infatuated with him, but I think it's also notable that Marvin Harrison coming in will dilute things a little bit for McBride. I'm not so sure that we're going to see Kyler be able to sustain throwing a ton of targets to both McBride and Harrison right out of the gate. So I do kind of want to see how things shake out with that. That's the only reason why I wouldn't have McBride that high, coming into the league. I think that the dispersion among the top tight ends is definitely closer than it used to be. For a bunch of years, it was kind of just Kelsey and everyone else. And then it was Kelsey and Andrews and everyone else. And now we have, Dalton Kincaid at the top, Trey McBride at the top there. So I would have, McBride a little bit closer down, in where he's going around the 3rd or 4th round, but I don't know if I would have him that high up there.
So yeah, I think it's interesting because we do talk a lot about how much, and I've heard this conversation a lot. I've been a part of it, like how much deeper tight end is now because we have Dalton Kincaid and we have Brock Bowers and we have Kyle Pitts. And I think it's worth saying that like we're super excited about those guys, but they've not done anything like what Kelsey or Andrews or Laporta last year or even McBride did last year. It is still a bit of a projection. And while some of those guys recently have paid off in McBride, we've also had a lot of young tight ends that we've been excited about that just didn't really ever turn back into much.
Right. Like Kyle Pitts last year and Kyle Pitts before that, and then Kyle Pitts the year before that. Right. And we just hope and we hope and we hope.
But I do, like, I agree. Like I go through my projections and looking at redraft from like a VBD perspective and what's going to be available in round 8, round 9, round 10. And tight ends don't project near as high for me as they would when I would just like eyeball it and rank them. Mm-hmm. Because the difference in my projections between those elite guys, and part of that's because Kelsey's projection isn't near as high as it was. Matt, we talked about like Tyreek Hill's runway. Christian McCaffrey went in round 1. Those are two guys who it's very easy to see, this could be the end at any moment, but they also might be 3 points per game better than anybody else. So maybe it's worth it. Kelsey's still that guy at tight end. Like it wouldn't really surprise anybody if he was tight end 1 this year and outscored everybody by 3 points, but he falls quite a bit further. Is that justified?
I think it is. I think that just like those guys, I think that people feel the end is closer for him because he's well into his mid-30s. I think he's probably going to be 34, 35 this year. And right. It's really at any moment, if Tyreek Hill gets a high ankle sprain, it's going to hurt him for the rest of the season, but he still has another year or two. If that happens to Kelsey, he might just ride off into the sunset with his billionaire superstar wife, and nobody could blame him for that. So I understand the trepidation with him. There's also, like you said, there's a slew of new hot young tight ends that are coming to the league. You mentioned Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, all these. I think that part of it is budgetary, where they're getting paid so much less than these top wide receivers that they're almost a free square for the GMs of these teams to put into the game plan where they don't really have to break the bank for these guys because tight end makes so much less money than wide receiver. But if they can dominate a part of the game, like the big bodied receiver, that as the league gets smaller and faster with the Zay Flowers and the Tank Dells and all these little quick gadgety guys that are taking over the league, the defense has to match that, and the linebackers have to get smaller and faster. The safeties and cornerbacks have to get smaller and faster. And the way to stand out above the crowd is to stand out above the crowd and go get somebody who's 250 pounds and 6'4" and is just as good of a receiver, but is harder to take down. So I understand this shift and why that's happening and why we're getting this new influx of tight ends. And it's exciting. I love it.
Let's run through round 3 here real quick. This draft is moving fast. We're already into round 5, but let's recap round 3. Devontae Smith went first, then Nico Collins, then DJ Moore, followed by Saquon Barkley, Michael Pittman, and Deebo Samuel. Mark Andrews in round 3. I took Jonathan Brooks. Then goes James Cook, Kyron Williams, DK Metcalf, and T. Higgins to Sam. So it's Devontae, Nico, DJ, Barkley, Pittman, and Deebo, Andrews, Brooks, and Cook, Kyron Williams, DK Metcalf, and T. Higgins. Sam, I'll ask you, and I didn't take James Cook, but I am extremely high on James Cook this year. I think with the changes we saw in the second half to the Bills offense, and then with the changes we saw to the Bills receiving core this offseason, Cook has an excellent chance to be a top 5 running back this season. How do you view him in Dynasty?
Yeah, I really like Cook, as a running back. Obviously, we keep hoping that the Bills are going to show some sign that they want him to be, their featured back. And obviously that includes goal line touches. That seems to have been shifted back again this year with them drafting Ray Davis on day 3, who is obviously, a 230-pound back from Kentucky, scored a ton of touchdowns last year, has a 3-down profile as well. So I do think that I think their priority is to keep Cook as fresh as possible, as healthy as possible, not to put too much of a load on his shoulders, so to speak. So, I do like Cook, in the regards that he's going to get all the between the 20s work, seemingly. I think, Davis will steal some of those goal line touches. Obviously, Josh Allen will get some of his goal line touches, as he always does. But other than that, I think Cook is set up for a lot of guaranteed work. He'll still see his role in the passing game continue to be strong. So I really like him from that regard. He's definitely, a guy that's in my top 10 and is definitely going to be rising pretty quickly there.
I had a crisis of confidence there. It was my turn to pick, and I was not prepared, but the pick was made. I got Xavier Worthy in round 5. We need to go back though and recap round 4 just to kind of catch everybody up who's listening on the podcast and not watching here on the screen. But round 4, we had Sam starting it off with George Pickens. I love that pick. Then Rashad White, Trey McBride, Tank Dell right before me. Both of those extreme snipes. I was ready to draft either one. I settled for Jalen Hurts. I got criticized in the chat for taking him over Josh Allen. I have Jalen Hurts over Josh Allen this year. So I am a little bit concerned about what this Bills offense looks like for Allen, because I think it's more likely that Hurts repeats his rushing touchdowns. He's rushed for double-digit touchdowns every year than it is that Allen, who basically doubled his career mark last year. After I took Hurts, we get Zay Flowers to Matt, Josh Jacobs, Isaiah Pacheco, Devontae Adams, Jordan Addison, Ladd McConkey, and Trey Benson. So a little bit of a rookie run that will continue into round 5. It's Pickens, White, McBride, Tank, Hurts, Flowers, Jacobs, Pacheco, and Adams, Jordan Addison, Ladd McConkey, and Trey Benson round out round 4. Matt, you took Zay Flowers there. What do you think the ceiling in this offense with Lamar Jackson as the quarterback? Can Flowers become his number 1 option ahead of Mark Andrews, or do you think he's always kind of a 1B in this offense?
I think it's okay to have the 1B in this offense. I think
Yeah.
it might have been 2 years ago. The Ravens were the highest scoring offense in the league, and we don't like to remember that really. I think it was Greg Roman at the time. So it's really gross to watch that happen. But Zay Flowers is good. He's got a lot of accolades among his team, and he can do the work after the catch. I love having the buddy system as well, because Mark Andrews is going to be a stud. Zay Flowers can be a stud right next to him. But then if either of them go down, I've got a nice little boost of confidence coming from that fall off.
I'm about ready to get mad in the draft room chat, Sam, because I understand what's going on. Everybody's looking at this, and it's an expert draft, and so we're not going to see very many quarterbacks taken. And I understand, but we're also trying to help people out. And it's round 6 now, and Lamar Jackson's still available. We did see Josh Allen go in round 5. And I know it's a 1 quarterback league, so it does make a little bit of sense, but at some point Lamar Jackson needs to be taken really soon, right?
Oh yeah, he should be taken this round. I actually thought about it really, really hard, but the tight ends just dry up after the top 5. Obviously Kelsey isn't the most advantageous dynasty pick, but the lineup that I'm building is a little bit closer to a win now team. So I kind of wanted to put Kelsey in there over Lamar, but I think Lamar is an excellent value right now, possibly the best value in this draft right now.
And I was just going to check and see if RJ took him. No, he took Zamir White. So I guess I won't. And this is the reason that we tell you guys to wait on quarterback. Although I will say, and again, we've had this struggle at CBS for a few years now, because we do redraft mocks, and a lot of times we'll get to round 4 before a quarterback's taken. And then we look at regular ADP, and you're going to see multiple quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds of a draft. And so it is hard to kind of massage that difference between what are you trying to do. I just took my 4th rookie. How do you like this start for the first 6 picks, Matt? And it's you've already made your pick. So we've got Marvin Harrison, Tyreek Hill, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Hurts, Xavier Worthy, and now Brian Thomas in round 6. Forget the fact that there you go, taking Lamar Jackson. Thank you, Matt.
Well, I wanted to stack him with Andrews and Zay Flowers, since we were just talking about it.
What a terrific best ball lineup this would be for Matt.
I would love it if it was 1,200 people instead of 12 people.
I want to bring that up. I'll ask you, Matt, because you're a ways away from picking. We're seeing that best ball strategy and best ball mindset really creeping into just regular redraft analysis, and probably a little bit into dynasty analysis. Do you think that's all a good thing, or are there some concepts that are kind of best left in the best ball world?
I think both. I think it is a good thing. I think sometimes it's just fun. I don't think that stacking Lamar and Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews is going to give me an edge on the league, but it's going to make my Sundays a lot more fun. And sometimes it's just that simple. There are concepts that you can take into it. There are strategies that are different for me in best ball versus especially dynasty, but in league lineups, it's okay to have more of these like Brandon Cooks type characters, the Ezekiel Elliott's, the Raheem Mostert. I don't think that I would have ever wanted in a lineup league last year, but I had him in a bunch of best ball leagues, and that worked out really well. So I don't really know how to transfer that into a lineup league.
Well, I think it is and it's not just the lineup part, and that does matter a lot, but it's also the idea of being able to use waivers in the middle of the year versus drafting a team and then never having to think about it again, never having to manage that roster, and being able to cut players if they get hurt or add players. And I think it's interesting because I see more and more, especially when it comes to ADP. Best ball has set the ADP at this point. You look at any consensus ADP, and that factor is going to be in there. And I think when we get to August, you're going to see a lot more running backs earlier in drafts, as more, I don't know if normal people is the right way to say it, but normal people start to do their drafts. Let's take a look at what happened in round 5. Joel Cox started that round off with DeAndre Swift, then Ken Walker, then Brock Bowers, Cooper Kupp. That is such an interesting pick, and we'll come back to him, followed by Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, Mike Evans, Xavier Worthy, Josh Allen, Rashee Rice, and Keon Coleman. Joe Mixon to Sam to end the round. So we had Bowers, Kincaid, and Pitts go within a span of 4 picks there, Sam. Do you have any strong opinion between those 3 guys, or is it just kind of whichever one, like in this case, the guy that went last wasn't much of a value because it was in the same round, but if one of them happens to fall around past the other 2, that's the one you'd want to target?
Yeah, I think of those 3, it would be Dalton Kincaid for me. Like we've talked about, Allen's dearth of really meaningful targets this year after both Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis departed the organization this offseason leaves 250 plus targets up for grabs. It makes complete sense that Kincaid's role is going to drastically increase. He was already drafted into the league as one of the premier pass catching tight ends that's come in over the last few years. And I think that's a perfect role for him to kind of jump in more into in his second year in the league. Obviously, Dawson Knox is kind of solidified in there as their, blocking and inline tight end that's still going to play, a role in the receiving game. But I think Kincaid is the guy that they really want to take over that short to intermediate portion of the field. And he was really, really good at it last year. So I think it's very logical to think that his role is going to increase. We've heard rumors over the last week or so that Keon Coleman is still a little ways away from being, an every down contributor to this team, despite his high draft capital. And then behind them, you only have Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir, who are good role players, but neither are going to play a featured role in this offense. So I think Kincaid has a very strong possibility to cross over and get, north of 120 targets this season. I definitely think he's in the running for the tight end 1 spot, along with the other guys that are up there. And I think he should be a lot closer to the top 3 in Dynasty than a lot of people give him credit for.
Good stuff. Whenever I try to host a podcast and run a mock draft and pick a team, inevitably at some point I realize, oh no, I didn't do this. This is that moment. Let's take our first break.
Football action continues. Are you ready for this? Ready to take chances? As the gridiron is taken over by the Great White North. It's time to storm the fortress. It's time to fight on the battlefield. Catch the Canadian Football League on CBS Sports Network.
We are back and we are recapping round 6. The next thing I'm going to realize that I've lost the thread on is completely not having any idea who my highest ranked player remaining is, but you guys can just all laugh at me when that happens and I'm on the clock. In round 6 of this 1 QB Dynasty startup mock, Travis Kelce, the first pick to Sam Wagman. Amari Cooper goes right after him. Then we get JSN. He was definitely on my roster. Zamir White is next, followed by Brian Thomas, Lamar Jackson, Christian Kirk, CJ Stroud, Stephon Diggs, Ramondre Stevenson, Christian Watson, and TJ Hawkinson. And we've talked a lot about tight ends, Matt, but I do think we need to talk a little bit about TJ Hawkinson because he was one of the guys who was no doubt about it, top 3 or 4 dynasty tight end and going to be a must start guy and I think he probably still is. He's just negatively impacted by this year. That's pretty good value on Hawkinson, isn't it?
Oh, I think it's fantastic value on Hawkinson. You're right. I think he was aiming for a top 2 tight end finish. He's only 26 years old, I believe. He's 3 years younger than Mark Andrews. And he's 8-9 years younger than Travis Kelce. I think it's completely okay. He didn't have a multi-ligament tear. I think it was just a clean ACL. He's going to come back. You probably won't get to use him this year, but the way that he built his roster around Devontae Smith, Brandon Ayuk, Justin Jefferson, he's pretty set up for the long haul. And with Trey Benson, he might not be looking to compete straight out of the gate. So I like that. I like pairing up TJ Hawkinson with Trey Benson, and everything else that he has, every other cornerstone piece that he has is a nice long-term asset without much risk.
Okay, Sam, you've made your picks at the 7-8 turn. I just want to take a second. I'm gonna pull up your team. I'm gonna read it off to you, and you can kind of tell me how much you love it, hate it, or just maybe okay with it, because I'm gonna need some time to figure out who I'm gonna take here. I can't believe I just got sniped on Tyjae Spears. I'm not pleased about that. And you took Javonte Williams. So I'm going to read your team off. You can tell me how you feel about it. But more importantly, I want you to talk to me about this Denver running back situation, because I do think there's a huge opportunity for profit if you get this situation right. So you've got Kyler Murray, Joe Mixon, and Devon Achane. You've got A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, George Pickens. You've got Travis Kelce and Javonte Williams through 8 rounds. How do you feel about the team, and how do you feel about this Broncos running back room?
So in multiple rounds, I have gotten sniped on the quarterback that I wanted. I had both Joe Burrow and Anthony Richardson queued up coming into my recent picks and lost both of them out there. So I did reach a bit on Kyler Murray. I don't love that, but I wasn't going to be up for another 24 picks. So it makes sense to take Kyler there. I think he's the last possible guy that you can take at this range and, still be in the mix for, a handful of top 7, top 6 QB1 finishes over the next few years with his rushing ability and the addition of Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride's output there. So I think that's a really strong, but I'm starting to capitalize on people that are down on Javonte Williams. And the recent news, Cecil Lammey from Football Guys reported over the past few weeks that there is a possibility that Javonte Williams doesn't even make the team and that Jaleel McLaughlin looks like the RB1. They obviously brought in Audric Estime from Notre Dame this offseason. They brought in Blake Watson as a UDFA. So I think people are all over the place with this Denver backfield. And yes, it is true that Javonte Williams has not lived up to his draft capital that, of the second round when he was drafted a few years ago, but he is coming off an ACL tear 2 years ago. There's tons of data that states that running backs in year 2 off of the ACL reconstruction tend to perform a lot better. So I'm counting on that for Javonte Williams, who I've been a fan of for years now. Loved his hard running style coming out of North Carolina, and I think it fits really well in Sean Payton's offense. So I'm hoping that, in year 2 of Payton's scheme, he utilizes him a lot more, knowing that he can do a lot more coming off of that ACL reconstruction. I think Bo Nix will rely on him pretty heavily in checkdowns and dump offs and routes out of the flat there. So I really like adding him as my RB3 here. And, even if it doesn't work out long term, like I said, this is, shaping up to be a team that I want to win now with. So Javonte gives me a really good shot to win now and also gives me some long-term flexibility.
Matt, let's check in on your Ravens. I mean, your fantasy team. Lamar Jackson is your quarterback. Travis Etienne and Breece Hall are the running backs. That's elite. At wide receiver, you've got Mike Evans, Marquise Brown, and Zay Flowers, with Mark Andrews at tight end, and Derrick Henry as well. How do you feel about this build?
I'm excited about it. I probably should have waited a little bit on tight end, but all in all, if Marquise Brown can even be, do you remember Juju Smith-Schuster? Do you remember that guy?
Yeah.
No, no idea who he is.
Great season. Yeah.
He had a great rookie season, but then he also was very usable when he was a Chief. And it's easy to forget that. And I don't mind taking a shot on Marquise Brown. If he's the one that finds a connection with Pat Mahomes, then I think this is already a winning combination. Mike Evans is one of those guys that he doesn't really fit the bill between Mike Evans and Derrick Henry. I'm just hoping for 2 more years out of each of them. But if I can get 2 more years out of each of them, they are both very elite. And even on rebuilds, I have trouble selling these guys for less than 2 seconds, just because they could perform for another 2 years. They're both kind of athletic freaks. And I don't know if I want to bet against them. I don't want to bet on their fall off coming too soon. So I'm okay with Mike Evans and Derrick Henry, even in a dynasty league.
I like it a lot. And I think like that's an area for profit if you can go acquire those guys and you happen to get 2 more years out of them, because they are mostly being treated like you've got 1 year left and then everything's going to be a disaster. But
this is the 4th year in a row that they've been treated like that, right? Yeah. So
no, exactly. Yeah.
I'm tired of losing that bet.
Well, that's why that you can kind of like you can find them. I think it seems to me, especially Henry, is much higher than someone with his profile and age would have been in years past. And it's just because we've all taken a turn saying he's going to bust for a variety of reasons, been wrong. And now everybody's like, nope, I'm just going to rank him as what he's been. And whenever he goes over the hill, then I will admit it. Let's take a look at what happened here in round 7. Joe Burrow was the first pick, followed by Alvin Kamara and Caleb Williams, then Anthony Richardson, a little bit of a quarterback run. Terry McLaurin and Deontay Johnson seems very fitting. Those two would go back to back. Then Derrick Henry. I took Jaden Reed. Calvin Ridley goes to RJ White. I'm a big fan of Ridley this year, but do prefer Reed and Dynasty. And then Najee Harris, Jaden Daniels, and we talked about Sam already, took Javonte Williams. So we had 4 quarterbacks in that round: Burrow, Williams, Richardson, and Daniels. Sam, in terms of a dynasty ranking, what order would you put those 4 guys in? And remember, this is a 6-point per pass touchdown league. So it was Burrow, Williams, Richardson, and Daniels.
I would have Richardson comfortably at 1. I think the upside that he gives you with his rushing and the possibility of him becoming a very, very strong passer is something that should probably have him close to the top 5. Rather than closer to the top 10. So he's my number 1 there. I really love the upside that Jaden Daniels gives you. I think if he can avoid the RG3 track, which some people have associated him with very unfairly, in my opinion. This is a guy that threw for 40 touchdowns at LSU last year and was really, really efficient while doing so. Showed a lot of range, his deep ball passer as well. He would be my number 2 there. Then I think Burrow would be my 3 there, just given, his body of work that he already has, the fact that he's hopefully fully healthy coming into the season off of that thumb injury. And then Williams would be the number 4 there. I think Williams will be fine. He's, an effective scrambler at times when he needs to be, but I wasn't sold on him as, a generational prospect. I think he was a very, very good prospect, but I wasn't sure if he was going to be a generational prospect coming in. And, the Bears have a way of making things not well for their quarterbacks. So he's at 4 right now, but I think him and Burrow are very close. They could flip-flop with each other in the next year.
Worst thing possible that could have happened, and then we'll take a break. Somebody asked for a reset because they picked the wrong guy. I give them the reset so they can go back and change their Xavier Legette pick. They take Jalen Warren, who was the top guy in my queue. So, yeah, I almost just reversed it and said, no, you can have anybody else, but you can't have him. Instead, I'll just take Jamison Williams, who seems to fit in pretty well on my team. It's all of the young upside wide receivers. We'll talk a little bit more about that right after this.
Oh, my Lord, disaster! Across the board. Sail GP is back in New York City. On point. These are the best athletes on water.
We are back and we are ready to break down round 8. Kyler Murray, the first pick of round 8, followed by Devin Singletary and Aaron Jones, then Tyjae Spears, who I really wanted, but I was just as happy to get Zach Charbonnet. Marquise Brown, Evan Ingram, and David Montgomery, then George Kittle, Ricky Pearsall, Blake Corum, and Brian Robinson. And we had a very, very strange comment in the chat. Somebody said that Adam Azer has drafted a great team. So, Matt, I'm going to let you evaluate that comment. We're going to pull Adam's team up here and just see who exactly he has on it. He was the guy who took Patrick Mahomes early. So we have Mahomes, Kamara, and Ken Walker as the running backs. The wide receivers, Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, and Ladd McConkey. Has Jake Ferguson at tight end. And then Blake Corum and Christian Watson are his flexes. It's Mahomes, Kamara, Walker, Chase, Nico, McConkey, Watson and Corum at flex, and Jake Ferguson at tight end. What do you think of this build?
I think the only person that could have said that in the chat is Adam Azer. Is it Adam in the chat saying that?
Adam, I do not see Adam in the chat. No.
Okay. I think that getting gifted Jamar Chase at 102 is the thing that's really making this team look good. So Pat Mahomes, Jamar Chase, fantastic. And then if you don't have anything nice to say, you should say nothing at all.
Well, I appreciate that. Listen, I think Nico at the beginning of round 3 is earlier than I would do it, but I prefer Tank Dell over Nico in Dynasty for sure. Tank actually went with the 4th pick in round 4, so a little bit of separation there. Sam, I think you just finished off round 9, so let me read through that. We'll go live here for about another 10 minutes, and then we will finish this draft up offline. As always, there will be a full article with full results. So if you're frustrated that you can't keep up with exactly who's been taken, you'll be able to see all of that online probably sometime this afternoon. Joel Cox takes Chris Godwin to start round 9, followed by Ferguson, Tony Pollard, Austin Eckler, the snipe of Jalen Warren, then Jordan Love, Curtis Samuel, Jamison Williams, Zach Moss. There goes Leggett, David Njoku, and Jalen Polk. Saw we had a comment in the chat that this draft is way too low on Chris Godwin, Sam. On yesterday's show, Adam Azer's bold prediction for the season was that Godwin was going to outscore Mike Evans in full PPR this year, which he's done a couple of seasons in the past. Do you agree that we let Godwin fall too far?
I do. I really actually like Chris Godwin. I wanted to take him myself. I had him penciled in there, but I think Godwin going back to the slot is going to be a very, very good thing for him. You know, with them drafting, guys like Jalen McMillan that can play outside if he needs to. I think this is going to be a very, very good thing for Godwin this season. We've always seen him play his best game when he's fully in the slot and he doesn't have to worry about winning against press man on the outside, which he's not as strong at. Guy absolutely crushes zone coverage from the middle of the field. I think that's where he does his best work. That's where he finished wide receiver 2 a few years ago by doing a lot of slot routes. And I think that's going to be basically his return to renaissance this year. I have him ranked inside my top 24, and I think he's going to be absolutely fantastic this year.
Matt, I want to talk about that Curtis Samuel pick that we talked about from round 9. He has had some success with the offensive coordinator there when they were both in Carolina, and we had the great DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel wars of what was that, 2020, 2021, whatever, 2019 maybe, all the way back there. This is a wide open receiving core. You could tell me like 4 different guys could be the best wide receiver on this team, and I wouldn't be that surprised. Does Samuel have a chance to be the best wide receiver on this team in 2024?
Absolutely. And I think that he's, not to toot my own horn, I think he's an incredibly clever pick. If Keon Coleman is going at the end of the first round in rookie drafts, you could probably trade that pick for Curtis Samuel and a future first. And I would much rather re-roll with a free Curtis Samuel, who's only 27 years old. Like you said, he did very well with Joe Brady. Joe Brady likes using him in screens and pre-motion snaps, and even rushing. He'll probably end up with 20 plus rushes this year. It is wide open up there in Buffalo, and Curtis Samuel might be the clever pick of that room. It's an easy free square for me as these wide receivers dry up.
I'm going to shame Aaron. He just had a wrong pick and makes the swap from Kendre Miller to Roman Wilson. And I'll be honest, Aaron, I don't really want to draft either one of these guys, but you did get your guy because we know we're trying to make people happy. Let's run through round 9 real quick because there are a couple interesting picks here. I think we just did that. So, Sam, you took a couple of rookies at the 9-10 turn in Polk and Jermaine Burton.
Yeah,
are these
I
complete dart throws or guys you like?
No, I absolutely love both of them. I think I've warmed up a lot on Polk since he was drafted. Looking at the Washington offense last year, I was a huge fan of Jalen McMillan. He outperformed Polk when healthy and almost was on par with Rome Odunze's production when he was healthy. Unfortunately, McMillan was limited to, I think, 8 games last year before getting injured and down for down for the majority of the season. So Polk had to step up, and he really played well as, a boundary threat for this Washington offense. And now gets to go to a New England offense that is completely going to be revamped, has Drake May for the future. In the meantime, has Jacoby Brissett penciled in as the starter. And I think it's a really good landing spot there between him and Javon Baker and Pop Douglas. I think the three of them are going to form a really underrated passing offense with Polk's ability to get open downfield. So really like that. And then Burton, for me, is a guy that could easily rise to be Cincinnati's wide receiver 2 in 2025 if T. Higgins ends up leaving the team after his new contract is up with them. And I really like Burton because despite the fact that he managed to piss off every single coaching staff that he played for in college, both Alabama and Georgia, he played massive roles on both teams coming into the league. We've seen him be a downfield threat, as well as play a role in the short to intermediate portion of the field as well. And I think if it weren't for his off-field issues, we would have seen him be an early second round pick. And people were even talking about him as a top 3 or 4 wide receiver in this draft class. So I think the NFL really knows that Burton can be a threat. I think it's just about, basically keeping his head on straight. I think being in Cincinnati with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow basically locked in there, I think that's a good place for him to, learn how the NFL works and really hone his abilities there. And I think him serving as the third option now that Tyler Boyd is gone is going to be really, really good for him.
We've reached the point in the mock where I have to remind myself, like we say this in regular startup drafts, you don't have to draft a starting lineup. You don't have to have running back depth, especially. And still, in a mock, I get to round 11 and I look at my team and I think, man, I don't have enough running backs. And so I'm stocking up my queue, and in a 3-pick stretch, a 5-pick stretch, we get Jaleel McLaughlin and James Conner and Jalen Wright. I think Azer had a good turn there. Like, we've given him a hard time, but McLaughlin in round 10, James Conner, there's no reason he should be going that far behind Austin Eckler and Aaron Jones. Sure, he's probably going to get replaced after the year. He's probably at the end of his rope. But that seems like a really good value on Conner, and somebody who, if you're not a contender this year, there's a decent chance in October you can turn him into a second-round pick. We are in round 11. I am on the clock, and I am going to go ahead and take Jerome Ford, who I expect to be the starting running back for the Browns for at least a chunk of this season, and maybe for longer. I'm not super optimistic, Matt, that we're getting good Nick Chubb ever again.
That's fair. And if you want 11.4 points every single week, then Jerome Ford is definitely your guy. I was hoping to get you a little hot and bothered. I stole Raheem Mostert right in front of you just because you were talking about running backs, and I don't want you to win.
Yeah, no, that was that's another pick. Again, Mostert along with Conner, neither one of them should be available in round 11 if Austin Eckler is going in round 9. Because I'd rather have Conner and Mostert both this year than I would Austin Eckler, even in a full PPR draft. And I think all three are pretty much equally likely to be completely done as soon as this season's over. It is time to wrap it up. I do appreciate you guys being a part of this. Matt, I'll let you go first. Tell everybody where they can find your work, how they can follow you. Go right ahead.
You can find me on Twitter at FFMadJester. I'm a contributor to JWB Fantasy Football. And along with Nate Polvote, I am starting up at Optimus Fantasy on Twitter, and our YouTube channel is at Optimus Fantasy Football.
Sam, you made your picks quickly, so you're not going to be on the clock while I'm asking you to do this. Just do the same thing. Tell everybody where they can find you, how they can follow you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Swagman95. I am a part of the vast Football Guys team of content creators and experts over there. All of my fantasy football work for the time being can be found over there. And thank you again for having me, Heath.
And I thank all you guys who were in the chat, very active chat today. Thanks to everybody listening to the podcast. We will be back on Tuesday talking about June Dynasty rankings risers. We will talk to you on Tuesday.